I've been on a journey to test every single Nikon-made Z-mount lens, and I've hit a milestone. I've officially tested every single wide-angle lens made to date, so today I'm going to rank them by their value for money. A couple of things to note before we begin. First, by wide-angle, I mean 35mm and wider. Second, the pricing, I am basing this on non-sale new pricing as of May 2025. And this comes before the known increase that's coming from Nikon in June of 2025. However, that increase of price should be fairly uniform, so it shouldn't affect my placement on this list. You should also note that I have used, owned, or currently own every single one of these lenses that you'll see in this list, and this list reflects my own opinions only. In order to rank them into a value for money score, I'm using a hodgepodge of versatility, optical quality, maybe fun factor, build quality, as it relates to new price. Finally, everything after this is, by and large, going to be improvised with some show notes. So after I get everything on the board and ranked between low value, got what you paid for, or high value, I will arrange any tiebreakers so we have a full list of best to worst value for dollar. Rent before you buy, and now we can begin. The DX12-28 f3.5 to 5.6 PZ VR, $359.95. Pretty simple. It's not a bad optic. The PZ adds some versatility, but the variable aperture decreases versatility, and so does the focal range. With the crop factor, it's 28 to 42, which just isn't that much. It's kind of cheap feeling in plastic mount, and plastic mounts pretty much always get a 1 on build quality. It is inexpensive though, so it ended up being 2 points. It's worth the money. The 14 to 30 f4S got 2 points, $1349.95. This lens has gone through a change in my scoring as of recent. I used to call it a high value 3, but I just downgraded it to a 2, saying it's worth the money. That is because of another lens that's coming up in a bit. This lens is pretty versatile, going out to 14 in the genres where you do need to go that wide. The aperture isn't really a big deal in those genres. Also, it's a constant aperture, so that helps. Most importantly is the optics. This is a very good optic with top marks all over the place, and it feels pretty tanky. Today, it's 2 points, totally worth the money. The 14 to 24 f2.8S is $2499.95. This is a little harder because I feel like it's a little overpriced. Optically, it's as close to perfect as you could hope for, and again, goes out to 14mm, which is necessary for some genres. And you can do quite a bit of other stuff with this lens too. I don't have a category for slightly overpriced, and this certainly isn't a bad value. There are just other options on the market, which is why I call this lens worth the money if you have it, and honestly, it's a ton of fun to use. We're going to put that closer to the line just because it's so dang expensive. The DX 16 to 50 f3.5 to 6.3 VR. It got a 2. It's $309.95. Really cheap build, not very expensive. Pretty normal or weak optically. It's a cheap kit lens with an okay focal range and variable aperture. Sounds like I'd give it a 1 for bad value, right? But it's not, as long as you get it as a kit, because it comes with a discount as a kit lens. Only get this lens if it's in a kit and you don't have another lens. Don't buy this lens on its own. The 17 to 28 f2.8 got a 2. It's $1199.95. This is the lens that makes the 14 to 30 worth the money and not high value. This lens isn't high value itself, it's worth the money, because if you know you need to go to 14mm, 17 isn't gonna cut it. On wide-angle lenses, the wider, the better, which hurts this lens's versatility. But the f2.8 helps bring it up a little bit, just not enough to make it high value for now. I may call it high value later, because optically, this lens is pretty good and a lot of fun. The DX 18 to 140 f3.5 to 6.3 VR. It got a 2. It's $639.95. This is a very fun lens. I enjoyed using it very much. Optically, it's weak in some areas and middle of the road in other areas. It's a cheaper build quality too. What makes this lens is its versatility of the focal range. Its focus performance also is pretty dang good, and again, it's a ton of fun. The 20mm f1.8S, $1,049.95. The only reason this lens doesn't get a 3 in value is because a 20mm prime is just not that dang versatile. It's not doing many genres. This lens optically though is just so good. It even gets the rare points that I give out in optical categories, and it feels pretty good in the hand. I think wide primes are fun, but they aren't really for everyone. To me, it's a high value lens, but for most people, it's a 2. Worth every penny, so I give it a 2. The 24mm f1.8s, $999.95. This lens is in the same ballpark as the 20mm in a lot of ways. It's just slightly not as good optically. It's a little better for video. If 24mm is your thing, I think it's worth the money because it's pretty solid. It's kind of a whisper overpriced. It should be like $100 more cheaper than the 20mm, maybe. But that's a maybe, so I give it a 2, not a 1. If you thought this lens was going to be in the video, it's because you didn't incorporate the crop factor. Sorry, it's not in this video. You introduce a crop factor, puts it at 36, so it just barely doesn't make the cut. But in case you're curious, this lens is a lot of fun. The 24-70 f4s got a 3, $999.95. This lens is straight up a good value. f4 is fine because it's not variable, and optically this lens is just really good. Lots of top marks. It's also really versatile because 24-70 is just a really useful range. At full price, it's worth the money. Even better if you get it as a kit lens, even though it's way too good to be called a kit lens. The 24-200 f4 to 6.3 VR, $899.95. I hate this lens. Optically, not very good at all. Lowest scores possible across the board. The only saving grace is its versatility with the 24-200. It got a top score there, but it feels cheap. It's variable aperture, and somehow it's still $900. This lens needs to be $500 cheaper to match what I actually think it's worth. Sit down in that chair, 24-200. The 24-70 f2.8s got a 2, $2399.95. This is almost optically perfect in its score. It gets all the extra points and such. It's also really versatile. You can do almost anything with it. Mid-range zooms are just like that. It also feels pretty sturdy. Sounds perfect, right? I think it's a little bit overpriced at $2,400, but because it's so good, it's really hard to argue that. That's why I gave it a 2. It is worth the money. Just because it's slightly overpriced, we'll kind of put that closer to the bottom. The 24-120 f4s got a 2 or a 3. That's $1,099.95. Optically, I scored this lens kind of all over the place, but most importantly is the overall image and how it comes together, and it does so really, really well, regardless of its individual optical scores. It's also really, really versatile, and it's actually a ton of fun to walk around with. I don't like external zooms, but otherwise, this lens feels pretty good in the hand, and it looks good. Not that looks matter. I gave this lens a 2 or a 3. It's worth every penny unless you get it at a discount as a quote-unquote kit lens, then it's just a smoking deal. The 26mm f2.8, $499.95. This sleeper is surprisingly one of the best rendering lenses in the entire Z-mount lineup. At a very, very good price, I'll add. I always wanted to make it a 3-pointer high value, except a 26mm prime isn't really that versatile, even though it's tiny, which does help, and it's f2.8. I've always said that if it was a wider aperture, even an f2, even though that's nothing compared to f2.8, I'd probably just go ahead and call it a 3 because it really does kind of deserve it. But instead, it's a very, very high value 2-point lens. It's worth every penny and may actually be a little bit cheap considering how good it is optically. So we're going to kind of hover that one between between these two here. So the 24-50 f4 to 6.3. It's a 1 or a 2. It's $399.95. This lens is very average optically. This lens could be a bad value or worth the money. How? It's $400 whenever you get it by itself. At that price, the focal length is just very strange, maxing out at 50mm, and at 50mm, its variable aperture makes it a 50mm f6.3. I ask, would you ever buy a 50mm 6.3 prime? Probably not. It's not a super useful lens. I kind of want to say it's a 1 for the purposes of this video. It's just a really awkward lens to be so optically average, or in some cases, optically weak. So it's a 1 or a 2 in my grading system, but for this video, we'll just stick her there. And if that's the trend we're following, we'll go ahead and call this just barely a high value, because this is going to fill up. The 28mm f2.8, and we are talking the non-retro looking one. They are both optically the same. The non-retro one is $299.95. This is an easy one, really. It's a cheap build. It's not super versatile, not super sharp, not excellent for black and white ability, and contrast and color are very middle of the road. It is, however, super accessible and dirt cheap. It's actually worth exactly what Nikon is charging for it at full price, so I gave it a 2. The 28-75 f2.8, I gave this a 2. $1199.95. This lens is pretty middle of the road optically, but its constant f2.8 aperture makes it versatile, and it's a mid-range zoom, so it's even more versatile. Since it's better than half the price of the 24-70 f2.8s, I'd love to give it a high value tag, but the f2.8 does not save it from the optical excellence found in the 24-70 f4s, which absolutely kills this lens optically. So I give it a 2. It is worth the money. The 28-400 f4 to f8 VR. I gave this lens a 2. $1299.95. This lens is painfully middle of the road optically. The only thing that it shines on is obviously its versatility. It does a lot of stuff, and it does it just okay. I gave it a 2 because it does a lot for the price tag, but the caveat here is I did not have a good time using this lens. It's useful, but that f8 is just tragic for me personally. So the 28-135 f4PZ, I gave it a 2. It's $2599.95. So this lens does have great optics. The constant f4 aperture is nice, and it has a wide focal range and power zoom. So of course, I gave it a versatility score of 3. I give it a worth the money score of 2, and that applies really to photography. Since Nikon intended this lens to be a video lens, I would almost say that if that's what you're doing, despite not having super duper high optical scores, it may be invaluable to a video person. So I'm going to stay at 2 on the value, so it's worth the money. But if you're a video only person, between you and me, I'd give it a 3 and call it high value. Final note, this lens was so much fun, even for a non-video person like me. We're going to kind of stick this in the back over here so we can arrange them. The 35mm f1.4, it got a 1, $599.95. Okay, so this lens is a 1, and the f1.8s helped put it there, but ultimately, it's Nikon's fault for absolutely missing the mark on price. This lens isn't that good in any regard. It's weak in sharpness and black and white ability and build quality. It feels cheap, otherwise it's middle of the road. The only good thing is its wide aperture. It kind of makes it useful, and 35mm lenses are typically just pretty versatile inherently. This lens, I think, is overpriced by a pretty good percentage. It's like double the price that it should be. I think it should be $299.95, like the 40mm f2, which in my opinion is actually better optically. The 35 f1.8s, $849.95. Oh look, another one. Bad value. This lens is seriously just okay. It gets a 2 on every category, making it the most middle-of-the-road thing ever. It's absolutely not an $850 lens. The 50mm f1.8s, not being discussed here in this video, is better in every way than this lens and is $200 cheaper, making this lens very overpriced and worthy of a 1. The 35mm f1.2s for $2799.95. So now, as far as 35s go, this lens is tough. I score it a 1 or a 2. It is currently, in my opinion, Nikon's most beautiful lens overall. It's my current favorite of all time. Besides not quite making a 3 on black and white ability, it's a perfect optical score with an f1.2 aperture, which is just awesome and useful. And being a 35mm, it's just inherently pretty versatile. That's why, for me personally, I have a really hard time arguing the price. it really is worth every single penny because it's technically the best in some categories. However, I said from the beginning that 2800 is insanity for a 35mm prime, and I can't disagree when people say no 35mm is ever worth that kind of money. For me personally, this lens is so damn incredible and so much fun to use at f1.2 that today I give it a 2, but I won't even argue with people in the comments that say it's overpriced. All right, so we've got everything on the board. Now, kind of just disregarding these over here, we're going to try to put this in order. So I think still the 24-120 is the best bang for the buck in this range, even though, no. I think for what we're calling wide, actually, the best bang for the buck in this particular list is actually probably the 14-30. Because you get that 14-30mm constant f4 aperture, and we're talking wide lenses. Technically, these ain't that wide. And so anything that goes further than 24 has got to be better. Yeah, the bang for the buck has got to be there. And if we're talking wide, this would naturally have to be second. Got this PZ 12-28, so we'll just kind of stick this down here. Now I think we can probably fill in some of these that are just good bang for the bucks. The 24-120 was about to win until I considered, oh, we're talking wide. Followed by this one, these are just so optically useful. Oh man, it makes this 14-24 over here kind of a little more difficult. It's not exactly a great bang for the buck, but it will go wide. We're talking wide lenses and it will go wider. I almost have to put this right here. Sorry, 24-120. I got a lot of love for your usefulness, but, you know, we'll fill this in. I think, talking usefulness here, let's put the PZ, because, like, if you're a video person, you really just can't beat this little lens here. It's pretty cool, pretty cheap feeling, but... And then this here, this 26mm pancake, it deserves to be higher because it's just so good optically. But, you know, I mean, it is what it is. And just for the video people here, this 28-135, it probably deserves to be a little bit higher, but, you know, oh gosh, I don't know. I'm already not liking how this is turning out. The 16-50 is pretty great for that first timer. Super versatility with the 28-400. I kind of like that right there, but I'm going to move that down because the 18-140 here is just so much dang fun. Let's move this back. The 20mm f1.8s, bang for buck, it can't be better than the 28. In fact, this is just such a cheap lens. We'll move this over here. It's got to be behind. Now, this is way more versatile, so we'll put the 28 2.8 here. These are expensive, slightly overpriced, so it can't be there. Contested, that can't be there. The 28-75 is more versatile and better optically. I actually want to move this one over here because this is not that it's a wide lens. It's 28-35. It's not doing much. Actually, God, this is hard. These ones that are just barely in the wide angle range, like this 28-75, it's like 28-35. And so it's not versatile as it relates to wide lenses, but it's versatile in other ways. I didn't really think all this through. This is definitely more useful and slightly more expensive. I'm going to put this kind of down here and let optics prevail. The 28mm is just a good bang for the buck. We're going to stick that there. We did consider the 24 to be kind of slightly overpriced and the 20 to be worth the money. We'll put that there. This is super versatile, but not in the way that we're talking about. It's just not that good optically. This is worth the money, but I guess it's slightly closer to overpriced with that disgusting variable aperture. Okay, not all these are going to be ranked ones, but we need the space here. At 35, we're contested. This is slightly overpriced, but it's still good. I actually want to say, just because it's so expensive and not as versatile as the 28-400, we'll stick that there. And then the 35-1.2, I think should be filled in here. Okay, disregarding this over here, since we're talking wide lenses, I tried to get the widest ones as long as they're not dog poo optically. I tried to get those closer to the top, I think, and I'll probably change my mind on this in like 10 minutes after I finish editing this. I think the best bang for the buck for sure on wide angle lenses is the 14-30 f4, just because of its optics. And we'll follow that by the 17-28 2.8, followed by the incredibly expensive and slightly overpriced 14-24 f2.8s, just because it's wider than the widest of this 24-120 f4s. We'll follow that by the less versatile 24-70 f4s. And even though this is significantly optically better, we're going to go ahead and put this, because that little PC makes this kind of useful for video people. We'll give the video people a little bit of love here. So the DX12-28 power zoom, followed by the 24-70 f4s, followed by the fantastic tiny little 26mm f2.8 with undeniable optics. The 28-135 power zoom for them video people. This is probably going to be ranked much higher. And we follow that with the 16-50. Wait a second. Yeah, we'll follow that with the 16-50. This is actually more versatile. We'll go like this. That's fine. We'll put the 18-140 right here, followed by the DX 16-50. All the DX lenses are now out of the way. The 28-75 f2.8 is optically superior to the 28 f2.8. Apertures will be the same, so I think that's pretty fair. Followed by this, I would call this a 3 because I absolutely adore the 20mm f1.8s. It is optically better enough to beat the 24 f1.8s, which is not that much more expensive. Again, this leaned kind of close to a little bit overpriced. I think it needs to be, instead of being like $50 cheaper than the 20mm f1.8s, I think it needs to be about $100 cheaper. And now, again, we're not saying that these lenses here are a bad value. We're just using the space. The 28-400, f4 to f8, followed by the 24-70 f2.8s. I think it's worth every single penny. It's just slightly overpriced. The 35mm f1.2, my baby. It's ridiculous. $2,800 for a 35mm prime, even though the optics are worth it. This is absurd. A 35 should never be that expensive. I won't argue with anybody in the comments over that one. And we never arranged these bad value ones. I think, honestly, price-wise, I actually have to put the 24-50 pretty close to last place because a 50mm 6.3 is just stupid. And so actually the 24 to 200 f4 to 6.3, it is more versatile than these 35s that are also overpriced. So we can be friends again, people that adore that lens. I think the 24 to 200 is fourth from last. The 35 f1.4 has to be second to last. So the 35 f1.8s, its decent optics are the only thing saving it from being second to last. The 35mm f1.4, obnoxiously overpriced for what you're getting. However, the 24 to 50, even though it's a zoom, 24 to 50 is not that much. And that variable aperture and that tiny of a range just makes this lens kind of absolutely worthless, honestly, unless you just get it for like almost no money, at least in this list. So I'm not totally satisfied with this arrangement. This was actually kind of obnoxiously hard to figure out where I wanted to put these. So let me know in the comments how you might arrange these. I'm 𝑧Wade, the 𝑧Wade, and 𝑧Wade Photo, and that's all of Nikon's wide lenses ranked by value.